Recently, I asked the viewers of our podcast to ask any questions they might want to, and that I would answer at least 10 of those questions. Well, we've received a lot of questions, and today I'm answering Gwen's question from Florida. Gwen writes, what is the best way to hold elected officials accountable to the Constitution? Who is in charge of deciding when or all of them has stretched authority past the constitutional limits? Did our founders have a citizen-driven manner of inquiry or charges? I am concerned that our Constitution is obsolete and has been so twisted and mistaught in our law schools that no one can get to the true meaning of it. The question is, what can we do? The first thing I think that any good American has to do is get educated. Americans are notoriously uneducated on the Bill of Rights, their Constitution, what the Founding Fathers thought and believed. As all the studies show, less than 10% of high school students can pass the U.S. immigration test when 93% of foreigners can actually pass it on basic knowledge of the Bill of Rights. And I'm holding the Rutherford Institute's Bill of Rights pamphlet up. So you have to get educated before you can have effective action in any walk of life in this country in terms of your civil liberties, what your rights are, or changing the government, and that's what this question is about, is you've got to know your rights. This little pamphlet here is very good. It's a Rutherford Institute publication. It's the Bill of Rights simplified, 462 words, easy to read, great for children. Children love this little pamphlet because we have cartoon pictures, but it's also good for adults. Just email us at staff@rutherford.org and we'll get you a free copy of this particular brochure. But you cannot hold the government accountable if you don't know your rights, and that's the principle, because if you don't know your rights, you don't know when they're taking them away. Routinely, I ask law students who come into our summer intern program, this is part of the question, have the law schools basically stopped teaching or perverted the teaching of the Constitution? Well, mainly they're not teaching it, and that's the problem. Routinely, I ask law students who come into our intern program, give me the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. I have yet to find one law student who can actually list the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. These are law students on their way to becoming lawyers, some after they've taken constitutional law. So you have to get educated on your rights. That's the first step. The second thing you need to do is protest and commit acts of resistance. And I'm not saying being violent, I mean be peaceful. Acts of resistance are picketing, getting out and making things visible in your communities and in front of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., if that's what you want to do. You have to be persistent if you're going to be a protester and a resistor. Martin Luther King is a great example in the African American Civil Rights Movement. They got in the streets. They didn't back down. Sometimes they had to sit down in the streets, block the traffic for a while. Some got arrested, but they made their point. It's called acts of civil disobedience. But that's an individual decision people have to make if you want to do that. You'll get an arrest record, but some people are willing to do that. Some of the peace protesters in the 60s were willing to do that to stop the giant war machine. The Founding Fathers, who we call the Founding Fathers, yeah, they thought it was active citizens involved. Don't forget that the American Revolution started with people who just said, hey, I'm sick and tired of this. I'm going to resist. I'm going to go out and I'm going to protest. The Tea Party protesters get their names from the fellows who threw the tea in the Boston Harbor, for crying out loud. They had had enough of what the British government was doing. We face a very similar empire in this country at this particular time, a government that's grown out of control, disregards our civil liberties. We thought that Barack Obama was going to reverse the Bush civil liberties deprivations and violations. He hasn't. It's continuing. So you have to make your presence known. And that's by being vocal, and you need to be out there. If they don't know you're out there, the government doesn't really care about you, and they'll move forward with whatever program they want, whether they want to violate your rights, impose governmental programs you don't like. It's going to happen, but it's your fault. The next thing you have to do is get involved. And what I mean by that is you have to get involved in your local communities. We have to remember this about government. Government is not proactive. Government is reactive. It reacts to you. And I think change has to start in the local communities. You really can't change anything in your local communities, A, if you don't know your rights, but B, if you don't know what's going on. Do you read your local newspaper? The local newspaper will tell you when the city council's meeting, what kind of taxes they're imposing, when the school board meets. If you don't like what's happening in the schools, and a lot of people don't, The United States ranks 10th or 11th in the world among industrialized nations in terms of literacy, and we spend more per capita on education than any country in the world. That's not a good thing. You should be down at your local school board meeting asking, why is this happening? You should be down at your local city council meeting, if need be, en masse, saying, why these high taxes for some of these programs? I mean, most people complain about their local real estate taxes, property taxes. They are very high. And above all, folks, turn off the TV in the end, get up and do something. You'll not do it by sitting on your butt, watching some personality news guy, whether he's a liberal or conservative. That's not going to do it. It's going to take direct action by grassroots folks who want to change their local communities. Finally, take action in all areas of life. If the schools don't teach the Bill of Rights, get this pamphlet and teach it to your children. If your next door neighbor doesn't want to get involved, you get involved. And that's a good thing there. And I'm talking about neighborhoods. Go door to door with your neighbors sometimes with a petition and say, hey, I don't like what they're doing down at City Hall. Get them involved. Get people's internet web addresses. Get them involved in a web community where you can talk and discuss these things. Because at heart, America is about local citizens affecting local change and national change. And again, let me say this. Governments are not proactive, they're reactive. 10 emails or 10 letters to a national congressman in Washington, D.C., that will get them worried. We've actually had congressmen's offices call the Rutherford Institute when we've done press releases on issues and say, what are you doing to us? Because they've got 100 phone calls. They react. They want to get reelected. And that's your job, is to make sure that if they don't do their job and don't listen to you, they don't get reelected. So you can change things, but you need to get out there, be proactive. Don't let someone else do it for you. And get emotional. It's time to get mad about these things so we can change our country for the better.